If you are somebody who enjoys painting from photographs, but you struggle with also feeling a sense of freedom and the ability to paint loosely and interpret the photograph in your own way, if you feel a bit constrained when you're working from a photographic reference, like you have to get everything right and copy it exactly, this is the video for you because I felt that for so long. And lately, I've just been so enjoying painting from photos, and I've developed a lot of different skills and techniques that I've been using, and I just can't wait to share it with you. So, the first thing that I'm going to talk about is how to choose the right photos. And I think that this is so important. Like, it often gets overlooked as just kind of a given that what matters is your painting skill. And if your skills are good enough, you could paint any image and it could turn out well. And so for a long time, I was very discouraged because I would try to paint from these reference images that just weren't a good choice. And then I would think that it meant that I didn't have enough skill or ability because I wasn't able to realize it, or it never turned out how I was envisioning. So, yeah, these days I'm coming to believe that choosing the right references and choosing your subject matter is just as important, if not possibly even more important, than your technical skills as an artist. And of course, it's different for all of us because we're making different work, we're focusing on different subject matter, we have different styles. So it's not like there's a one size fits all rule book for how to choose the right photos. But I do think there are a lot of good rules of thumb and things that might apply to you in your practice as well that I've kind of come to live by when it comes to painting from photos and choosing which photos. So that's what I'm going to share. I'm going to share the things that I avoid and the things that I look for, and then also when to change something about a photo and how to go about doing that, because so often we can feel constricted when we're painting based on a reference. We feel like we have to stay true to it, even if we know we don't. I don't know, it's this weird thing, and I'll talk more about it. But painting from photographs, and that's why it's so often like advised to paint from life, which I agree with. But I do think we can also get rich, vibrant, and lively work painting from photos. It doesn't have to be dead and stagnant. So often it is, though, because we do feel very constricted and this sense that we have to stick to the photo. So I'm going to get into all that. And then I'm going to show you the process from start to finish of me creating a painting based on a photo. And then at the end, we'll just come back here and debrief a little bit. I'll show you the finished piece and chat a little bit more about the concepts that I discussed. If you have any of your own tips that I don't talk about in the video, please leave them in the comments down below, because I think we're all so curious about like the techniques and tendencies that other artists have developed, and we can learn so much from each other when we share that. So on to the discussion of the photographs. I have this stack of photographs, and I'm going to go through them with you and kind of talk about which ones I consider to be good potential painting references and which ones I would just stay away from. So I wanted to start off by showing you some of the photos that I actually have recently painted so that you can get an idea of the types of paintings that I've been making and what I'm going to be talking to you about how to make. This one, I just fell in love with this photo. I love the pattern on these two shirts and the red here. I always love a pop of red. And I thought that this sort of natural framing situation with all of these lines in the background would really lend itself to a beautiful painting composition. So this is the painting that I did based on that. And as you can see, I've changed some things. I have leaned in a different direction with the color, even though I have sort of kept most things the same color. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this framing in the doorway and the background. So I will talk more about that later, of deciding what to eliminate from the photo and what to keep. But yeah, so that's one example of a painting I recently did based on a photograph. The next one is one that you may have seen if you've been watching my videos, but it's this recent painting based on this photo of my parents. And this one I made 3 different versions of, so I was able to really experiment and see what I liked and did not like in terms of the amount of information that I wanted to keep in, and I'm very happy, especially with this version of the painting. And then there's one more I wanted to show you. It's in here somewhere. Okay, so this photo became this painting. And I really was attracted to this big plane of yellow, to this shape of the light there above his head. And I liked the sort of expression on the child's face and the interaction between the two of them, as well as these objects here in the foreground that just provided some visual interest. And this is how that painting turned out. Okay, so those were a few examples. Now, let me get into the other photos. This one I am very drawn to. I think that this would make a great painting. The curtains with that kind of greenish purple, and then this, like the bed sheets and pillowcases provide a really interesting and subtle way of adding some quite bright colors. And then this green sweater just goes so well there. I don't know. I think this has a lot of potential. And then as well as the shape here of the lamp, halfway cut off. Yeah, I'm really leaning toward painting this one, but we'll see which one I decide on. This one is one of my photos. This is an old photo of my parents. And this is an example of one that I just think is a gorgeous photo, but it would just not make a good painting. It's a photo of 2 people smiling at the camera, and I have never seen a painting of that. that was really interesting. You know, it could be a very beautiful framing, a beautiful landscape, beautiful people, but if they're just standing, looking forward, smiling, that's not really going to make an interesting painting. This one I like. Yeah, I think that these gifts and the book in her hands, like those provide a good opportunity to really play with color. And I like her expression. I like that she's looking off to the side, and that could really like draw the viewer in. This one is a very cute photo, and I think it has potential as a painting reference, but we can't really see the color much. And so you'd really have to interpret it your own way. It's quite dark. And then I also think the amount of stripes on the couch might just be too busy. But I don't know. I could see it working. This one I really enjoy. I think the stockings in the background adds a lot of visual interest and like a rhythm because it's that repeated element there. And then, I don't know, I really like this cut off art in the corner. I think that this has some good potential. I would be worried about this. It looks like a trash bag. And it's sort of it's not a very interesting shape, and it's a lot of dark right there. So I do think that if I did paint this, I would have to do some editing. I would have to take some of these objects away to make it less visually chaotic, and maybe tinker with this section right here as well and not have a big black object right there. This one I like also. I just think the 3 like lined up people with their different outfits, it reminds me of the one I did of the children. And one of them provides that pop of red, and then another one provides that pattern. I don't know how I feel about this hat and this person in the foreground. I think it could come out really cool. Yeah, it might just need to be, we need to add some color and not have it be full white. But yeah, I think this photo has a lot of potential. This one, I am less inclined to. I just don't think it's interesting enough. I love the pattern. I like what she's doing with her hands, but it does just kind of in the same way as this, it just kind of feels like a photograph and not really something that could tell much of a story in a painting. This one I like a little bit more. The two figures, I like their expressions because they're not smiling with teeth. That's something that I try to really avoid. Smiles with teeth are not attractive in paintings, and that doesn't mean you should never paint from a photo where people are smiling with their teeth, but like, for example, in this one of my parents, I did not paint my mom's teeth. In fact, I didn't paint any detail on her face, and that's the style that I've been enjoying working in. But even if I did add more detail and was adding, more of her eyes and mouth and nose, I would definitely just kind of imagine that her mouth was closed. And I think that that's just like a good rule of thumb. Like, we shouldn't be painting teeth. You may disagree. If you have an example of like a good painting with teeth in it, let me know. I'd love to see it. I don't like this as much. Yeah, I just don't think the background is interesting. I like her outfit. I like this pop of green and the red and the crazy pattern of her dress, but the background is just not really providing anything for us to run with. I think that would kind of be a boring painting. This one I love. Okay, I love the yellow, love his like neckerchief. And I love that the two figures are interacting when they look at each other and when they're having some interaction. That's very interesting to me. That's always been one of my favorite things to paint, is two figures interacting somehow. I also love the yellow telephone with the wire. I think this would be so much fun to paint. This, again, I think I picked this up because I loved her outfit and I thought that that could be fun to paint. But I don't think I'm going to end up using this one because, again, it's just she's looking straight at the camera. It doesn't read as a painting. This looks just like, a vacation photo. And this one I also really like. I think the wheels and the little baby carriage is such a good focal point. I love the pink and the red shoes down here and this pop of plaid on his pants I think would look so good in a painting. But I do think since there's a lot going on, it might need a little bit of editing as well. We might need to not put in all of the detail of the background. Okay, that was everything. I hope that those tips kind of helped you to see the things that I look out for and the things that I try to avoid when it comes to choosing photos to paint from. And I don't know, let's decide on which one I'm gonna do. See, this one I don't love. I feel like I'm torn between this one, and this one. I think maybe for the sake of the video, I will do this one because it'll be quicker to paint and I'll be able to show you more of the process. So step one is I'm going to prep my surface and then I'm going to put down a color. The second thing that I have to really consider is which color I want to do for my ground. So for this painting, I did this green, this like golden chartreuse green color. And for this one, I'm trying to remember. I think I have a photo of it from when I first did it, so I'll just flash that on the screen. And then for this painting, it was like a deep red color was the ground that I chose. For this guy, I'm thinking either the pink or the green. I might be leaning toward pink this time. So I think that's what I'll do. I'm going to prep a surface and I'm going to cover it with like a sort of a dusty, like bubblegum color. And then we'll meet back and I'll let you know the next steps. So I've decided that the best way to go about this next portion of the video is to do a voiceover while showing you certain key moments of my painting process and just kind of talking about why I made certain decisions and what I was thinking at different points during this painting. I did do the math and added up the total minutes of working on this painting. I think it was in 3 or 4 different sessions on a few different days. And I spent 3.5 hours on it. So I just thought that might be useful information for you all if you're wondering how long this painting took from start to finish. It was about 3.5 hours. And after laying down the ground, actually, it was a bit longer than that because I did not videotape me painting the pink. Unless I did and I lost the video. Anyway, doesn't matter. I started off this recording after I had laid down the pink ground. And my next step was to sketch out the composition and just place everything where I wanted it to be. I have tried different techniques for this. I have done the whole projector thing. I have done just like really measuring and trying to get a very precise underpainting, undersketch. And then I've also just eyeballed it and used the skills of perception that I've developed over the years to try to make things as accurate as possible, but also not be over the top about it. And I think that method is hands down my favorite. Not only is it the most enjoyable, like it's fun for me to get to just sketch from sight and try my best to make it accurate without obsessing, but also it leads to the most interesting paintings in the end. And I think it also does something to my brain where I feel freed from perfection and freed from staying within the rigid forms. Like when I used to project, I would do like an underpainting, let's say, and then I would project my sketch or my photo that I wanted to paint onto the canvas, and then I would trace and just like mark out where things were going to end up. And that's like a really useful shortcut because you can get that image on the canvas super quickly. You don't have to think too much about it, and you can just focus more on the painting and that technique and that side of things rather than your drawing ability or your skills of observation. So I do think there's a time and a place for that, but with the type of paintings that I really like making, I just don't think it's the best method for me. And what was I saying? I just sort of feel like constricted by it. And sometimes I would sketch everything out and I would know for a fact that it was accurate, right? Because I had projected it. But something in my mind would tell me it doesn't look right and I would want to change it, but then I would feel constricted by the fact that I had done the undersketch and I had measured it out carefully, or I had traced it and I felt like I just couldn't go against it. I don't know. It was a weird thing. And let me know if you have this experience or if you have tips for getting past that if you do prefer to go the projection route. But yes, so what I've been doing lately is just eyeballing it and being loose about it. So when I do my underpaintings, I sometimes put things in the wrong place, and that's all right. I'll end up fixing it later, or sometimes I will decide that I like how it looks where I sketched it, and that even if the proportions are a bit off or something is just not accurate to the reference, sometimes I'll decide that I actually like it better that way. Or since I've been working in layers, it's quite easy to just adjust it later on in the process once I notice. Okay, the next thing that I did was just blocking in some basic colors, like where I knew I was going to want a certain color, I would just plop it in there like pretty loosely. Yeah, I knew I was going to want the walls to be a sort of green, and I knew the curtains were going to have that green color, a little bit of purple. The blanket was kind of a sand color. So yeah, I just kind of went ahead and put those colors in quite loosely where I knew I was going to want them. If you are curious about the colors that I used for this painting, I pretty much just used the primaries and then white, burnt umber, and cerulean. So yeah, everything was basically just a mix of those six. Is that six? Yeah, 6 tubes of paint. And I used the burnt umber really sparingly. For the most part, it was all just a mix of the 3 primaries and white, of course. I used a lot of white. When it comes to figuring out what I want to do with color these days, it's very experimental, and I will mix a color and then lay it down in a few brushstrokes in that area where I want it to be so that I can see what it looks like next to the other colors. And the more I do this, the better I'm getting at being closer to my desired result with like the first color mix that I make. But usually it's still pretty far off. When I first mix that color that I think I'm going to want to use, I will lay down a few strokes and I'll pretty quickly see that it is off from where I want it to be based on how it interacts with the colors next to it. So then I just go back to my palette and mix some other color into it and just adjust it and tinker with it until it's what I'm looking for. And that's another thing I really like about working in acrylics these days, how quickly they dry and how much you can just layer them without really ruining your painting. Yeah, I've been really liking that. When it came to the whites in this painting, I didn't want them to be too boring, and I ended up playing around quite a bit with the temperature of the whites. I think at one point the sheets on the bed or the blanket, whatever the white part is, was really blue leaning, and then I took it more warm toned and I just kind of played around with it and went back and forth until I liked what I was seeing. The window panes and the window frame, that felt a little more straightforward. Like after only 2 layers, I think, of those white colors that I mixed, I ended up really liking it and saw no reason to keep pushing it. So I just left it. Left it where it was at. I really enjoyed building up the pattern on the curtains little by little. Really early on, I already loved how it looked, but then I just kept adding to it, and it was a challenge to decide when to leave it alone because I did really like it early on. But yeah, I think that I pushed it just far enough. As I'm looking back, I do recognize that maybe I pushed it a little too far. I'm not sure. Let me know your opinion in the comments once you see the end result. My initial thought with this pink area in the painting was that I would be able to leave the ground showing through, and that the pink of the sheets would be the pink that I had laid down at the beginning. And it was kind of hard for me to decide to backtrack on that or to change my mind on that because I did really love the look of it. I loved how simple it was. I loved that pink color and the candy stripes. They were just so pretty. But as I stepped back from the painting and really looked at it with fresh eyes one day when I came back to it, I noticed that that part just felt like separate from the rest of the painting. And that's not always a bad thing, but it just was missing some cohesion that I was after. And I realized I really did want to cover up that pink with a slightly more neutral pink that I had mixed and just give a little bit more variety in the shadows and highlights. And I think it turned out really well. I think it's not as different. I was afraid that I would like ruin it. And when I would cover up that pink, that I'd never be able to get it back. But I do think that was the right call to make because the painting ended up looking so much more cohesive because I made that choice. So at one point, I added in the shadows in the folds of this white blanket, and I really did not end up preferring that. And I think that's something about this style that I've been learning and kind of cultivating. that always takes me by surprise is that sometimes the more detail you add, it just takes away from it. It just sort of ruins it. And it's just like that one step too far that can just completely derail a painting and take it from being this very simple, harmonious, balanced image to just feeling off. And that's what these shadows were doing for me when I added this gray on the bottom left and bottom right as well a little bit. Yeah, I was just kind of like, that's not what I want. That's not what I'm liking. So I ended up going over it. And that was probably the part of the painting that I worked the most, that I sort of worked and reworked, because even though it's just this simple white shape, it had to be right. Like, I think sometimes the temptation is when there's just a really simple area to just kind of write it off and not pay special attention to it. But I've been finding lately that those are actually the areas that need the most attention, because it can be so easy to just neglect it or not really think too much about it. So yeah, I ended up striking, I think, a good balance by adding just enough shadow to describe what was happening, but not to take away from the flatness of it all. And then I realized that painting this photo in particular is not a great example of how I edit photos, or I mean edit. When I say edit, I don't mean like digitally, but how I change photos in order to make them better painting references, because I barely changed this one. And I think that's just because it was such a good composition on its own. Like, I couldn't think of ways that I could improve it really. So I will show you the tiny little changes that I made. I think I'll probably show you that at the end when I'm showing you the finished piece, just so I can hold it up close to the camera and show, because yeah, the changes are really quite subtle. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the process part. I am going to talk to you guys a little bit about the finished painting. So this is our finished painting. I'm really happy with it. I think it's quite lovely. And the first thing, because I told you guys I would discuss the slight changes that I made, and I mean slight because really I just loved this photo so much and I could not see anything wrong with it that I wanted to adjust. So maybe not the best example, but for that reason I think I might show you a couple other paintings afterward and just give more pertinent examples on that topic. But the first the first change is just the aspect ratio. So I tend to prefer this aspect ratio, and it's also just what I had. If you're wondering about the support, this is just a piece of, I think it's matting, like for when you frame things. And I got it at an estate sale. So it's like an old mat. Sometimes I just pick up random surfaces like that because they come in handy, and it's fun to paint on different surfaces. I really liked the finish of it and how it kind of absorbed the paint a little bit and how the paint sits on it. It lent itself really well to that matte finish that I enjoy. And it's a matte, so it's a matte and it's matte. And then I told you I made a few other changes, and they're really so small that I have to get up real close. So the first thing is just that the edge of the photo had this lamp partially cut off, but I needed it to be less cut off, and I needed this dark shape here to just be slightly more prominent. And so that's what I did. I just kind of moved the lamp over and made all that stuff a bit more prominent in the painting. And then it's very subtle, but here you have this object and then the dresser or nightstand. And I decided to just do this one blob of this color to break it up and add a little bit more interest. And that could be like an object or another piece of bedding. It could be this peeking through. It could be anything. It doesn't matter what it's interpreted as. It's just I felt like that I needed something there that was midway between the dark and the light, and to add another color. And so I decided to take that opportunity to go in with more of that like purpley color. Very subtle, but it's those types of really small decisions that I think can totally change a painting. So I thought it was worth mentioning. And then the other change was actually an accident, and I'm not happy about it. In the original photo, the window panes, like, they're not equal. So it's not symmetrical. The curtain is covering much more of one of them. And then without thinking or noticing, I just made them all of equal size. And I didn't notice until it was kind of too late. I mean, I could have changed it, but everything was laid out, and like you can see the pink coming through from the background, and I knew if I painted over that, I'd lose some of that. And so I just decided to live with it. But yeah, I do prefer the asymmetry of the actual photo. Yeah, if I could do it over, I would not have done it that way. And then for anybody who is wondering why I bothered to paint the entire background pink and then cover it almost entirely, I don't know if you can tell so well on camera, I think you still can, how much that pink changes the way the entire painting looks. It really comes through in so many areas. Like this, you're seeing so much of that pink. The windows here, a lot of the pink, and then this green. It has the effect of neutralizing it because it's the opposite of green, and also just adding that beautiful, like, I think you can detect the pinkness through it. So it's a totally different effect from if you were to just neutralize the green and do all one color. So yes, I think that is all I had to say about this painting. And I wanted to talk briefly about other paintings in which I have done more editing and I have decided to take things out. This painting, which I still am so happy with, like, this is one of my favorite things that I painted this past year. And I will flash the photo up on the screen. It is quite different. So the entire background, I just made believe that they were in front of water, and there's like sky and water and horizon line. I do think there's water in the original, but there's also a lot of grass and like other stuff going on. And so yes, this is an example of when I took the foreground of the photo, painted loosely based on that, and then did not feel obliged to keep the rest of the photo how it was at all, and just use the natural surroundings as a bit of an inspiration. I think I still had that in mind when I kind of made this vague horizon line, but I just went with it the direction that I wanted to go, which was a very simple blue background. This painting, which I also showed on here, I had somebody in the paint club suggest to me to cover up, or, you know, to eliminate something from this corner, which I hadn't even realized. Like, I knew something felt off about it, but it helped to have somebody else's eyes to tell me, like, I think that this would be something worth eliminating from the composition. And I think that was great advice. So that's another example. And this is meant to be a study for another piece, and I still really want to paint this again. I just sort of have been putting it on the back burner because I'm working on other projects. But yes, I can't wait to return to this photo and this composition. And then the last painting that I will share as an example of this is this one, which I've already shown you earlier on in the video. And I just wanted to point out how much I simplified this area here, because in the photo, there's quite a lot of detail. There's a pretty harsh division between the two planes there. There's all these objects on the left, a highlight on the frame or mirror or whatever is right there. And yeah, I just decided to go simpler on that. And the objects in the foreground as well. I think in the photo, there's this goblet. And because that's such a beautiful object in real life and in the photo, I thought I would definitely want to include that. But when I painted it in here, it just didn't look good. It didn't look right. It was taking too much of the attention because it has all those little reflections and highlights. And so I ended up having to paint over it because I saw that it just wasn't working for the painting, even though I like it in the photo. So a lot of that decision making is also trial and error. Like, I do a lot of painting over things when I'm working from photos because sometimes you just need to see it in the painting to know whether or not it will work. And I think as we get more experienced, it becomes more obvious, more second nature, and we just know what will work and what won't. But I still am not as experienced as I one day will be. So I'm working on it. It's a journey. And I just love painting. It makes me so happy. So I hope that you guys got something from this video. Again, if you have your own tips, please share them. I'm so eager to find out what they are, and I will see you in the next video. I'm very excited about like New Year's content. I love the new year passionately. I love the reflection on the year that's passed and looking forward to the new year. Not so much resolutions as like big life reflective, contemplative overhaul. So I don't know if that's less toxic than resolutions. Resolutions have been getting a bad rap, I feel like. Anyway, if you want to talk about this more, watch my next video. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but we're going to talk about the new year, people. I'm excited. All right, see you then.